So today we're going to be taking a look at a scenario where Indonesia forms an empire. It has been a long time since we last did an empire video, and I was looking at the countries that we haven't done just yet, and it turns out that we've never actually done Indonesia, which is weird because they're one of the largest and one of the most populated countries in the world. So today we will be giving Indonesia an empire. If you do enjoy today's empire video, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you're new. All the support is greatly appreciated. Also, heads up, this Saturday the collaborative video that I've been working on will finally be released. So that is something to look forward to. Anyway, let's go ahead and jump straight into this video. So here we have all of Indonesia colored in red, and it will be this way throughout the whole video. So every time you see red, you can assume that is Indonesia, one of their allies, or one of their puppet states. The first thing that Indonesia will be doing is invading Timor-Leste. This is a very small country that borders them. Just wipe them out. I guess I should also just call it East Timor, right? Anyway, that is the first country that they will wipe out. It's also one of the weakest countries in the world, so there's really no need to talk about it anymore, so let's move on. But Indonesia will now set their sights over here towards Papua New Guinea, another very weak country that they border. And at this point, other countries in the region are starting to kind of oppose Indonesia's expansion. You know, invading East Timor, that's whatever, you know, it's not a very relevant country, which is kind of sad, but that's kind of how the world works. But Papua New Guinea is, I mean, also kind of irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. No offense to Papua New Guinea, but this is a little bit of a larger country. So of course the world is going to care a little bit more, but they'll do nothing for now as all of Papua New Guinea is completely invaded. And as we can see here, Papua New Guinea is going to be completely annexed. However, Bougainville over here, which is a country that is in the process of getting its independence from Papua New Guinea, will be made into a puppet. Now, I'm not too sure how they would react to that. You know, it's technically a step towards full independence, but at the same time, you know, Indonesia might not be willing to release them like New Guinea was. So the reactions here could be a little bit mixed. Otherwise, Papua New Guinea is completely annexed by Indonesia. So next up on Indonesia's chopping block will of course be Malaysia. And it's at this point that other countries are going to start to put their foot down. Hey, you can't invade that country. That is an innocent country that has done nothing wrong. And here you are invading them and, you know, ravaging all of their resources and erasing them from the map. How dare you do that? You better stop or we're going to do something about it. But as you can see, they did nothing about it because as they were complaining about Indonesia's activities, the whole Malaysian country was lost. So now at this point, Indonesia has taken over a majority of the Southeast Asian islands, minus the Philippines and some other, you know, small islands in the area. But they are making themselves a pretty nice Asian Oceanic. You know how there's like Eurasian? What would Asian Oceanic be? Oceasian, maybe? I don't know. That doesn't sound right though. Anyway, with the growing threat of Indonesia's new empire, some countries are going to take action, but in some different ways. Firstly, Vietnam will make an alliance with Indonesia. Now, I do want to go ahead and say that this video isn't meant to be realistic. I mean, obviously, if Indonesia started going on a rampage like this in real life, then they would get shut down really quickly by multiple different countries. But most importantly, you know, like things like the UN would get involved, and that's not good. You don't want that to happen. So there is some realism that we have to take out of this scenario, and you know, we're gonna have fun with it while we do that. So we're gonna throw Vietnam into an alliance with Indonesia. I don't think that would happen in this scenario or in real life, but why not, right? Anyway, the goal of this new alliance is to unite Southeast Asia under one country, or in this case two countries, being Vietnam and Indonesia, with Indonesia taking over all of the water areas like the Philippines and Taiwan maybe, and Vietnam taking over the mainland, being Southeast Asia itself and maybe parts of China. So part one of their plan will include invading the country of Cambodia. These guys are relatively weak and they don't have much outside support. Now, you could argue that China would come to the aid of them. However, China doesn't even border them. They do hold relations with each other in real life. And China and Vietnam aren't on the best of terms, but I don't think China would get involved over Cambodia. So at the end of the day, we do have Vietnam completely annexing all of Cambodia. Now, as for Indonesia, they will quietly take over Brunei. I mean, would anyone even notice? Brunei is so small. Speaking of small, Singapore, people would definitely notice Singapore leaving. But now it's time for foreign countries to react to Indonesia's aggressiveness. We have Australia and New Zealand creating a new pact together aimed at stopping the expansion of Indonesia. And the Philippines will join in on this alliance because, you know, there's a surrounding threat. Both Vietnam and Indonesia are near them. And this is what the pact is looking like so far. Now, for these islands out here, you know, honestly, I'm not even good with naming them, so we'll just get rid of them. Things like Fiji and, you know, other stuff. But they're going to be underwater in a few decades anyway, so who cares, right? And now for part two of their plan, which is to finally meet up via border connection. And Thailand is the perfect country to take out in order to, you know, connect up. But Indonesia starts invading into the south of Thailand, and Vietnam goes in through the east. The battle Battle of Bangkok happens, and it's a pretty tough battle for the red team, and it results in a loss as Thai forces push back the outside invaders. Additionally, Thailand will send out a call for help, specifically aiming at this dark blue alliance over here, but they get no answer, and they only get like foreign aid from India, which, don't get me wrong, would be very helpful, but in the grand scheme of things against the Indonesian Empire, it probably won't sustain the country forever. But it does allow them to fight on for a few more weeks, and they make very good counteroffensive progress. But then Vietnam will pull a Germany, invading into Laos in order to go around Thai defenses. And this is where Thailand will be caught off guard, as Vietnamese soldiers mixed in with Indonesian soldiers who landed there in the south will storm through Thailand's borders and start taking over any major cities. Thai forces are forced to fall back in the east, and with this, Indonesia restarts its offensive up north, recapturing Bangkok and effectively taking Thailand out of the war, as the last remaining forces on the blue team resort to guerrilla warfare. But eventually the war will finally end, and we can take a look at a peace treaty. And in this peace treaty here, we can see that Vietnam will take over a big chunk of Thailand, and then we have Indonesia taking over pretty much all of southern Thailand. But the country does still remain, and they're just crippled, they don't have access to the sea anymore, which will suck for them, and their major city being Bangkok is gone. But the Indonesian expansion will not end here, as they now declare war on Myanmar, with the goal of taking over their southern areas. And as they're making good progress, they get a very scary declaration from a country just west of them, and that is India. India will basically threaten to get involved in the war if Indonesia does not stop its invasion of Myanmar. And after maybe a little bit of sketchy tactics and very risky moves, Indonesia will finally stop its advances right as India is getting ready to join in. They're like, yo, chill out. And Indonesia and Myanmar will agree to a peace treaty, which has the Southeast Asian country getting about yay much land. And in addition to this, we have India doing something which is actually kind of smart, if you're anti-Indonesian, that is. They will guarantee the independence, which basically says if you attack them, then you're attacking us. But they'll guarantee the independence of Bangladesh, Myanmar, and Thailand. So this will prevent the red team from going after any of these other Southeast Asian countries, which means that they are basically stopped in their tracks. Now, technically Indonesia is buffed in this video because they need to form their empire, but that doesn't mean they can necessarily take on the strongest countries in the world. That doesn't make them the strongest country in the world. Against countries like India, they would probably get stomped. So they're forced to look elsewhere, and elsewhere doesn't really exist. You have the Philippines, Australia, and New Zealand. And if you want to take those guys on, you're going to need a little bit more help, because just Vietnam and Indonesia on their own, while more strong, are not enough. So these two countries will look north to China. That's right, China. They're going to get them to join their alliance, which is very shocking to the world. And not only do they get China, but they also get North Korea, and this will set off a chain of events over here in Southeast Asia and East Asia, with South Korea and Japan then joining in on the side of the dark blue team. And with the slip of the tongue there, just kind of spoiled what's going to happen. But Indonesia, Vietnam, and China will attack the Philippine Islands in hopes of dividing it up against the three, which is a declaration of war not only on the Philippines, but Australia, New Zealand, Taiwan, South Korea, and Japan as well. So the Philippines will experience invasion from three different countries, being China in the north, Vietnam over here helping out Indonesia in the west, and then Indonesia itself focusing in on the south. The Philippines is consistent of hundreds of islands, so this war would take a very long time, and it would take a very long time to wipe out the Philippines. But after China takes over Manila, it's basically over for the Philippines, as their islands start to shatter apart, and without any help from their allies, the Philippines will quickly fall over to red team forces. Now elsewhere, it isn't as bad for the blue team, as they are going up into North Korea, while China is distracted with the Philippines. Down south though, also not going so well. Indonesia makes a landing in northern Australia, and I do want to make an emphasis on the fact that Australia is near to impossible to just, invade. It's kind of like America. It has very challenging geography, and most of its population is dispersed around the coastal areas. You have the big old outback in the middle here, so you don't want to mess with that. But like I said, it's kind of similar to America. You have most of the population on the coastal areas, big old field right here, really big mountains right here, and some kind of smaller mountains over here, but they're still mountains. But where the difference is between Australia and America is the accent and the military power. Australia is nowhere near as strong as America is, and at this point in time, Indonesia is already stronger than Australia. So the Australians are getting invaded in the north by the Indonesians. Don't get me wrong though, I'm not saying that Indonesia is going to get this war done quickly. Australia will set up a counteroffensive which pushes back the Indonesians in their weakest area, which is furthest away from their staging ground. They will additionally get pushed back over here in the east, and it little bit over here in the west. Now back up north, China has finally gotten itself together and is now pushing back against the South Koreans, helping out the North Koreans, and then start to invade into South Korea. Now you might be thinking, where is the United States at? These all countries being attacked right now are US allies. The US has a defensive pact with pretty much every single one of these countries, so why isn't that getting involved? Well, remember earlier I said that we're taking realism out of this video. If you are familiar with the Empire videos, then usually there isn't a lot of realism in them. In fact, there barely ever is. Only when it's convenient. And right now, it's not convenient. So we're getting rid of the US's defensive pacts. You know, screw that. Decades of diplomacy thrown out the window. Who cares? Now, I do want to say South Korea is very capable of defending itself. And I don't think that they would be able to finish off South Korea, especially considering that Japan is helping them out. Now, Japan, their whole military thing, it's whatever. We're going to be giving them a military in this video because, once again, screw realism. But South Korea is going to hold out while, steadily losing ground against China. If China were to militarize their population, it would be game over for these two. But they're not doing that because they don't need to. Instead, they're going to focus in on Taiwan, who is also very fortified and hard to invade. But speeding up the process over time, Taiwan would definitely fall. And now the war is mostly just focused in on Australia and New Zealand. And in these two countries, especially New Zealand, the support for this war is near zero. Australia knows that it can't win against Indonesia, Vietnam, and China. Even with South Korea and Japan on their team, it's impossible. And at this rate, they're only going to lose land. So New Zealand will pull out of the war saying, you know what, screw that. And Australia, coming to the realization that, there's no hope, will also pull out of the war and agree to a sit down with the red team. Japan will pull out of the war, and South Korea is forced into another armistice with North Korea. So let's go ahead and take a look at this peace treaty. Alright, so in this peace treaty here, we see that Indonesia gets a little bit of Northern Australia. They have two separate parts, and the rest of Australia is left unscathed, as well as New Zealand. They didn't lose anything other than, military equipment and personnel. As for the Philippines, they are divided up. We have Indonesia getting all of the southern islands and China getting all of the northern islands, with Vietnam being able to get these two islands over here. Except these are probably not just two islands. There's probably a lot more than just two here. But on this map, it looks like there's just about two, maybe three, four. There might be a lot more than just a few. Anyway, going up north here, we have China taking over all of Taiwan. And then as for Korea, North Korea will push the border down south just a little bit more. And that's the end of the war. So in the coming weeks, we have China leaving the alliance with Indonesia. They kind of only wanted to join just for the whole invasion of the Philippines. Otherwise, they don't really care for the alliance, and that's because they know something. And what could that something be? Well, we'll find out here in a couple seconds. So yeah, Indonesia and Vietnam are the core members of this alliance. That's because there's only two members. If anyone ever joined it, they were only temporary, as we saw with China and North Korea. And currently, they are also very unfavorable in the view of the world. Now for what China knows. Oh yeah, the backstabbing of a century. The red team will attack China in hopes of wiping them out and giving them access to a whole lot more land where they can continue to grow their empire. Indonesia kind of has the same idea that Japan had in World War II, where they want to unite all of East Asia and maybe one day even all of the Pacific. Whether that's through invasion or alliances, that's up to the future, but for now they need to take care of China because China is one of the two countries standing in their way, the other one being India. So right away, Indonesia will take over China's claims in the Philippines as well as Taiwan, and Vietnamese forces will start to move north up into Chinese territory. Although the push is slow, they are being efficient as they start heading over towards Macau and Hong Kong. They reach the two cities and take them both over with open arms, and then an advance is made on the southern Chinese island, and that leads to victory. So far, it looks so good for the red team as they continue to move into China very slowly by taking over massively populated areas. And it's so good until China does what I mentioned earlier and militarizes their population. Although, to be honest with you, I don't even know if they would need to. But once China starts to push back, it's a little messy for the red team. They get hit pretty hard with a reality check as Taiwan is taken back in a couple of days. And it's only a matter of time until Chinese troops start to cross over into Vietnam. Vietnam starts getting flashbacks, ironically enough. And Indonesia is unable to bolster their forces enough to help their ally, as China is making astonishing progress after capturing Ho Chi Minh City. They also took their capital. That's equally as important as their largest city. Vietnam is getting absolutely obliterated. Chinese forces are now on the border of Indonesia. And Indonesia's like, wait, you know what? What if we just didn't fight anymore? I'm sorry that I did that to you. Let's sit down at a negotiation table. And China's like, no. However, if you're willing to give up a lot of land to us, we'll leave you alone, and we can even sign a non-aggression pact so we don't fight each other in the future. If I'm Indonesia, I'm taking that offer. You don't have to fight China, who is obviously going to go full force on you and take as much land as possible. in exchange for, you know, just getting a nice haircut, you know, losing a lot of land, losing their flow. Remember though, Indonesia's whole thing is trying to get as large of an empire as possible. So what's going to win here, brute force or smart? They're going to take the smart route. They're going to sit down at this peace table with China and figure this thing out. So in this peace treaty here, we see that the empire will actually lose. And I think this might be one of the first times I've ever had the empire lose in a video. But as for everything else, we have China taking over all of northern Vietnam as well as Laos. Cambodia is forced to be spit out, but they are not a puppet of China. They are just re-released. Vietnam does still exist. However, it's only South Vietnam and they are a lot weaker. All of the Philippines now belongs to China, and China even took a little bit of Indonesia just as a show of force and a reminder of you know, what might happen if they try anything smart again in the future. So that is going to do it for today's empire video. This is the Indonesian empire, but just not at its height. I figured that, you know, if I were to start doing empire videos again, which I really don't plan on it, but if I were, maybe we can do like a whole time scale of the empire. You know, you have it start out as it is, rise up to its peak, and then, you know, downsize like all empires have in history. Anyway, once again, thank you guys so much for watching. Look forward to the collaboration video this Saturday. It's going to be a really good one, and I will see you guys there. I usually say see you in the next video, but the next video is that one. So yeah, bye. And of course, thank you to all our super fans. This includes Arentine, Georgie Badev, Sermonator, German Edits, HammerToad45, Connor the Gamer, Poland Country Ball, Nevada Garbage Trucks, and DW Cool Dude. Once again, thank you guys.